right, you guys, welcome to Tech Unplugged. Today's topic is lessons learned you've learned in your career. And we've got 4 alumni, and I know 3 of these folks because I've either worked with them or taught them. Devin's the only one I haven't. I just met at a conference and invited him to participate with us. So I'm excited for them to be here and share their knowledge with you. So let's get started. I'm going to start with Devin on this one, and then work our way across. What do you do, and who do you work for?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I am Devin. I'm the identity and cybersecurity engineer. I just came into cyber a couple of years ago after working in mostly systems admin and doing IT support work. I work for Food for the Hungry, a nonprofit working globally around the world.
Hi, I'm Tyler. I'm a security analyst for Carlisle Companies Incorporated. I do everything SOC, SIM, and email security.
Tyler, do you want to give your disclaimer now, your legalese?
Oh, yes, that's a good point. All statements and opinions expressed are my own and may not represent the positions, strategies, or opinions of Carlisle or any of its wholly owned subsidiaries.
I'm glad you did that, Tyler.
All right, hi, I'm Jabri. Also graduated here. I'm currently at Kudelski Security as a new tier 2. So now it's more rule logic and helping out support the T1s. I don't have one of those disclaimers, but nice to be here.
So my name is Hannah Jennifer. I've been working in industry for about 2 years. I am a cybersecurity analyst at Family Health Centers, which is a nonprofit based out of San Diego.
Great, thank you. All right, so first off, what most surprised you about full-time work after college?
I think the thing that surprised me the most was best practice from my manager's perspective ended up being a very key word for him. And my mind is completely blanking. Might have to pass it off to you. I didn't know if I was supposed to start, or I didn't really have anything in mind.
I think for me, just how people-based it was, I was hoping that it would not be as people-based as it was.
Okay, hang on, don't put that down. Explain that a little more, people-based.
Yeah, so you have the technology, and technology, it does what you want it to do until, well, there's always glitches, but you can make all the technical changes you want. Those changes will get overturned and reverted if you don't have the people's support. So if you don't have the proper buy-in, if you don't have the proper support for said product or said configuration. So making sure that you make friends before making changes is the number one key thing that I learned.
Good. So if you guys ever hear me speak in your class, I actually start the semester. There's 2 things in business that make you successful. And you are in business if you're in IT. Now, the first is results, but the second is relationships. And relationships is probably the hardest part for most of us. We know how to do the technology. It's taking the time to build the relationships, to get to know people. So great point, Tyler.
I might just work off that what David just said with the relationships thing because it's definitely key. It starts here. I can give you guys some good news. If you're here right now, odds are you've got that skill or you're developing it because everything I've heard so far is correct. The technical stuff matters, but it's also how you work with whether it's clients or internal to showcase what you know technically. And so definitely key feedback.
I think for me, it was just how much you could realize that tools need improvement. Tooling is not always going to work as it should. EDRs aren't going to catch all malware, sometimes network traffic. And so it's learning how to find the gaps and learning that not all the tools are foolproof and realizing that and finding the gaps.
Yeah, and for me, coming into a very big nonprofit, I realized just how little configuration there was. And that's what surprised me the most and was really scary was even though you had a relatively large team, it created a ton of effort to get back to what it actually should be and required, like Tyler said, a lot of buy-in from the leadership in the organization.
Devin, can you talk about your career progression How did it go once you left college? What did you do?
Yeah, I'm quite a bit different from everybody here. I graduated with my bachelor's in business information systems, so I had to take like project management classes and stuff like that. And I didn't think I was smart enough to be a cyber guy. And so I joined Food for the Hungry right after graduation and started out on their support team, support level 2 essentially. And after a few years of that, they were like, okay, you're doing great. Let's get you into a junior sysadmin position. And that's where I started to learn Linux mostly. Didn't do a lot of Linux beforehand. Learned essentially a lot of cloud administration. And then they said, hey, we're getting Okta in place. You want to set that up? And at the time, we thought that was a completely sysadmin duty. And I took it on and said, no, this is really a cybersecurity thing, guys. This is identity. And that turned into really what I do now and progressing more into cybersecurity. And now I'm doing a little bit more of their SOC and IR work.
Nice. Hannah, how about you? What's your career progression so far?
So I actually worked while I was in college. So I started at the help desk, and from there I went over to the SOC over here at GCU. And then when I graduated, I actually received a job at New Genesis Solutions, where I was then offered a role at Family Health Centers.
How did your work between New Genesis and Family Health Centers, did it change a lot?
It didn't change all too much. New Genesis was a lot more clients. There's a lot more that you're having to learn with regards to each of the environments, and each of them are different. Each of them have different practices, different industries that they're working in. So that one was a lot more holistic approach to the industries that are out there for cyber, and then Family Health was more medically related. So learning more about HIPAA and PHI and all that.
Tyler, what's your career progression been?
I was a student here at GCU first. Got into the help desk. From the help desk to, I did a bunch of contracting work as a student intern in, I think what is now Canyon Ventures. It might have been the Innovation Center back then. And that laid the foundation for my interview with security. GCE Security. And then I did that for, I think, 2.5 years before transitioning to Carlisle.
And I know that you left GCU Security to go to Carlisle for a reason. What was your motivation to make that change?
I wanted to go global. I wanted to have calls, instant response calls for people in China and Europe. And I got those. And they're really fun, but it's also kind of crazy when you're doing like 7 p.m. and you're talking with guys in China, like it's the morning for them. So that's primarily, I wanted more excitement.
Yeah, that's fair. Sean, tell us about your career progression.
Yeah, so I started off also student here. I started at tech support, which was very good customer service based experience. And then a professor of mine told me to try help desk, where I got a bit more of that technical stuff, and that was a huge help. They both gave me beneficial things, but getting to help desk when I did worked in my best interest, because after help desk I went to the NOC for some networking experience before eventually going and graduating, getting to a T1 role as a security analyst for Kudelski, and then had a promotion to a T1 lead, which had some deeper technical stuff and some managerial stuff, and then now recently I'm a tier 2, which is deeper dives, and yeah.
Okay, so what's, thinking about, on your career, what's been the most difficult part about transitioning from, being a student to being a full-time worker, employee, even, I'm looking for here, it could be career related or lifestyle related. What was difficult for you?
So I guess one thing I'll start with is 7 a.m.s are never ideal for a class. My start time is 6, and my work is further than school ever was. So that's one thing I'll say. I think we take for granted, even the early class isn't really that early. And so that's definitely the first thing I'll say. And the more serious thing would be, I guess, imposter syndrome and not being sure whether you're doing a good job or not. I think for that, you should definitely sync with your manager. get their opinion, see where you can improve, see where they think you're lacking, and then that way you can either confirm your thoughts and know where you can improve, or reaffirm that you're doing a good job.
I think for me, it was a lot of work-life balance. You go to GCU and you have classes and you have breaks in between classes, and you can go work on homework with friends so it doesn't feel as daunting, versus work where you're working your 8 hours, and even after that you want to pursue your career, and so you continue to study for certifications, go for your master's outside of work. It gets to be a lot, and so work-life balance was definitely a huge thing for me, and especially working from home, learning how to balance all that.
How did you manage that?
I made studying fun, so I actually started to explore coffee shops, libraries, different environments, because I do work from home full time, and so that helped a lot with balancing that. And then also getting involved in my church. So I started going to young adults groups, Bible studies, and that just helped with the monotony of working, but also exploring my extroverted side.
Yeah, I think for me, kind of like what Hannah said, my issue was that I had to realize just how much extra effort I needed to put in on my own. When I was coming to school, I was already immersed into learning and really learning all new things. And going into the workforce, you might get some resources, but you really have to put in the time on your own time most times. And that was something hard for me to understand. I had multiple conversations with my manager, and he's like, "Hey, you have to put in more time outside of work to learn." And in my mind, I was thinking, "Yeah, but if I'm learning things for the organization, let me do it on company time." And that didn't work out. And so I had to find new ways to get in touch with the community, usually through Tyler, actually. And really, the people that really help you to learn.
Okay, let's touch on that just a moment. You said Tyler's helped you connect with the community. Can you expound on that more? What community? How did you guys stay in touch after school? What was that like?
Yeah, we've always been friends throughout school. We met at the commuter lounge back in the day. And I was in IT even before he was. And connecting with him and just having him as a friend in general helped me to stay connected to the cyber community. That's how I came to meet you, David, and that's why I'm here, is because I know Tyler. We went to a conference together, and now I'm here. But having those connections and having those friends, you get to build on each other and learn from one another. In one area that one may not be as strong technically, somebody else might be, so that you can come together and build on top of what you know and become a generally well-rounded technical person, or just a person in general, I would say.
I think for me, one of the things transitioning from school to work was you all of a sudden had a bigger paycheck. So when I first got my first paycheck, I blew it immediately on an Xbox and games and an office chair and an office desk, and I had to learn how to save money because I never had money as a college student. And then you get that first job, you're like, holy cow, this is insane. And so that was one of the first things. The second things was, I like what Hannah and Devin said. You have to, when you go to school here, you have your community here. When you transition into the workforce, you no longer have that community. And your work friends can be your friends, but you got to be careful with that. So being intentional, going out, finding volleyball groups, finding pickleball groups, finding ultimate frisbee groups, finding whatever group that you could connect with socially on a non-work level was, it took me a couple years, probably one of the biggest projects since then.
Good, thank you guys. So thinking about your time here at GCU, what about GCU, the programs, the campus experience prepared you for your work life?
I think just when you're hungry, you're willing to do work. And so I was literally hungry for food. And so I knew that like if I worked hard at GCU, I could build up the habits of working hard that would then transition to work, which would allow me to put food on the table. And so for me, that was the biggest thing, is working hard, then also learning to figure out what the rules were that you had to play by. So different instructors had different rules. Some were more lenient, some were more strict, some cared about citations, some didn't. And that's the same thing for work, is some managers care about one thing, others don't. So figuring out, you know, what rules to play by in what environment was probably one of the most important ones for me.
I guess what I'll say is, your question was, what did you do here that helped prepare you for work?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think that's definitely a good thing, a great one to start with, because we learn the textbook definition of things and how business operates here, but no matter where you go, it's going to be different. I'm sure all four of us have different experience on the day-to-day, just because different environments, different coworkers. So I'll readdress that one, kind of support it. The next thing I'll say is, I'm sure you have professors who say, certs. You probably hear experience. You probably hear, you have your degree. I hope you don't just hear you have your degree and you're good. I really hope. I don't think you do. I know these three will be honest with you, so I'll say what you do in college will set you up for as soon as you graduate. If you're holding out to hit the ground running as soon as you graduate, it might be more difficult. You'll face some challenges. If you get into those entry-level jobs now, it'll be one less thing you have to do after you have your degree, and then you can see that paycheck immediately. So I think using your time and resources now, because you have professors, you have certification prep right down there. You have all these resources where you can do it now while you're in school, and that might also help a bit with work-life balance when you're out of school. Using your time now for work experience, certifications, networking.
Yeah, and to add on to what Sean and Tyler said, you have to get your hands dirty. If I hadn't gotten my hands dirty and worked on things with my own hands, built my own labs, VirtualBox on my own laptop for years, that stuff prepared me for being able to go to my employer in the interview process and say, this is what I've done with my own hands. Not just definitions that I've learned, theories that I've learned, concepts. I've actually done this, I've built it out, and this is what I can do for you.
I basically have to say the same thing. So for me, what set me up to be where I'm at today wouldn't have happened if I hadn't worked outside of class. So for example, going to all the cyber clubs, there's quite a few of them, I have them listed. And also working through GCU, getting through the SOC. Like, I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't worked outside of class, and that's a huge thing. And even looking in class, like, you can network with all of your classmates, and sometimes down the road, if they have a job, they can help you out later. So it's even talking to people in class, getting their input, and making friends. It really does make a difference.
Hope you guys are absorbing that a bit. It's really important to do the extra, show up to things like this, come to the clubs, and kind of push yourself a little bit.
May I add on to that? So my friend Carissa, she was the reason I actually am in cybersecurity today. She, not jokingly, told me to go apply for security, and I jokingly kind of brushed it off. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I remember I think it was in 307, somewhere in this building. But she's like, no, do it. And so I applied and forgot about it, and 6 months later I got an email. But without working with her on those like papers in an unrelated project management class, without like actually participating in the classes and going to the extracurricular events, I would not have met the people that got me where I'm at.
So what skill, whether it's technical or they call it soft skill, I call it hard professional skills, has most benefited you in your career so far?
you have to talk to people that don't understand technology in a way that they can understand technology. And translating that can be the hardest part. You have to, in my experience, you have to humble yourself to not act as somebody that knows everything, but say things well enough so that they understand that you know what you're talking about, but also make sense to them. And so if you're not able to do that, you can't talk to leadership, you can't convince them to put these initiatives or budget for systems and tools if they don't understand what the benefit is.
Yeah, that's been one thing about my career. I felt like I've been able to do well is to connect the technology back to the people in business. So great advice.
I'd say think before you write and think before you speak. I heard, I can't take credit for it, was on LinkedIn. One guy said, I think it was Swift on Security, said security is less about malware analysis and more about managing people that don't report to you. And so learning how to motivate and inspire people to perform the security tasks you need them to perform. And that's all communication. So proofread your emails and read them twice and think before you speak. So
I think going off that, obviously no PII, but use ChatGPT for tone. It's helped me out a lot, whether it's school, personal, work. You might say something that you think makes sense and it's clear and it's not. It might come across aggressive, and then someone all on their defense will just disregard you. So just being mindful of how you communicate, whether it's selling yourself in an interview, because you might have those skills, but if you can't communicate them, then they really won't get you as far as you hope and think they will. So I'll also echo that communication. And then going back to the previous question, kind of bringing it here, I guess grit helps doing things when you don't want to do them. It doesn't have to be miserable when you study for a cert or when you get a part-time job that doesn't pay incredible, but knowing that if you do it now, it'll be easier later, setting yourself up for success, that's huge too. So those two, both soft skills, are very helpful.
So I just want to start with, I do agree with the communication side of it. You're going to be communicating with a lot of higher ups, a lot of colleagues. So being able to get your point across efficiently and effectively is a very great skill. Another thing for me is critical thinking skills. You are going to be faced with a lot of problems, a lot of complex problems that no one has the real solution for except for when you think through it and you communicate that as well to the higher ups and finding solutions that will benefit the organization in the long run.
I'm just going to work off that real quick. The critical thinking, yeah, absolutely. Let's throw that on the list as well. Deborah Harrelson, I had her as a professor, and it was my first real IT course. Everything prior to that was just the basics. And so when we were setting up I think it was a server for something on either Lobe Cloud or some kind of virtualization, I had a question because I think I missed a step, and I walk up to her and I asked, how do I do this? She said, Google it. And I was like, okay, I'll go sit back down and figure it out. And again, I'll reinforce what Hannah's saying. That's the skill you want to leave here with. If you can leave college being able to communicate and have critical thinking to pivot and find your answer, you'll do fine. I don't care who you are, you'll do fine.
Okay, so sticking on the critical thinking for a minute, is there something that, like a strategy or something you've learned about critical thinking that you could pass on?
So Joe actually mentioned it when I was talking to him before this started, and he said my questions back in his class were always curious. And I guess that'll be my answer. Even if you figure it out just by dumb luck, I guess being curious will get you to understanding, and understanding will get you pretty far.
Sean was in a Linux class with me when he was here, and I would agree. He had lots of questions, and they were always, taking him to the next step. So I do think when you have a question, be brave and ask it. Don't be like shy or think somebody else isn't asking it, because somebody's probably thinking it.
Yeah, to add on to that, I would say when you are trying to find an answer to an issue that you're having, something technically especially, I've had to lean on my previous experience and my own understanding of the tool that I'm using rather than blindly following whatever Google AI answer I'm looking at. And that has led sometimes in the wrong direction if we just blindly follow an AI answer that we think is going to give us a step-by-step process on how to do whatever we're trying to figure out. You have to really lean on your previous experience, your own hands-on experience, and say, okay, at this step, this doesn't sound right. I'm going to have to figure this out myself a little bit.
Okay. So for me, it's don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Don't afraid to run the script that might break things. Don't be afraid to explore tooling that you could break things, because the solution might be there, and breaking things is how you find the solution.
Another one is you can learn critical thinking through mentorship. There was a few interns at Carlisle that I helped mentor, and I credit them for actually discovering a lot of the detections that made our SOC decently tuned. And it's just simple things that they had said that triggered something. So approach the problem with two people is my solution there. Always have 2 or 3 people looking at that problem, because the meeting of the minds will help you figure things out. And going to the ego side, it's a team sport. It's not a you sport. So, you don't need to, yeah.
I think we had that conversation when you worked for me about it being a team sport. So glad you've grasped that.
A lot of lessons learned.
Yeah. With cybersecurity, you're usually on a team. I know some of you are on a small team, but you're not the only one responsible for defending the organization. It's why we build our teams, but we also build layers of defense, and so that you're not caught, you just shouldn't have to feel like you're the only person defending the org. It's a team effort. So nice point. So is there any trends in like technology or tools that you would recommend for students to spend some time learning as they're in school?
Definitely learn how identity works, and start mapping out all the ways that identities can be used to perform objectives, good or bad, in an organization. I read a CrowdStrike 2025 threat hunting report where it reported that 81% of the attacks were malware-less. So identity is, and from my experience, identity is the #1 entry point for most incidents. So learn Entralog, set up your Azure Home Lab or your Okta Home Lab, or I don't know what other IDPs are out there. Does Amazon have an IDP? I don't know. Yeah, not really? Okay. Yeah, so set up your home labs, learn how identities work, look at those logs, test in real time, use your VPN to emulate logins from Romania, Bulgaria, Lithuania, whatever those look like, and test that, because that is the trend that I see in most attacks now.
Any other trends or technologies you think people should learn?
Yeah, another one would be, I like Sean's point about being curious. Always try to figure out the full story. 9 times out of 10, the users will think it was a legitimate application or it's from a customer or a vendor. So the trend is, it's never as simple as it looks. You always want to find the beginning, the middle, and the end, and especially the middle part. And so the trend that I've observed there with attacks is they can be tricky, and so you want to figure out everything behind it.
Yeah, to add on what Tyler said, I would definitely agree. Identity is one of the trends that you absolutely need to know. Non-human identities is something that I'm seeing and learning about myself and how to manage those. Think your like service accounts, things that people aren't logging into, and typically are pretty vulnerable because you may not have MFA on that. and hopefully it's a good password, a very long and complex one. But how do you make sure that that has the right scope of permissions? You're tracking, rotating credentials. That has been probably one of the more difficult things that I've had to work on is trying to understand, first of all, what are our non-human identities and where are they? How can we keep track of them and make sure that when they're still being used, we can't have a random account out there with no MFA that's not even being used. I wouldn't say you have to learn the depths of like OAuth and SAML like I did a little bit working inside of Okta, but just understanding a little bit about how those frameworks work and operate and how somebody could use those to attack an organization is definitely a trend.
Yeah, it's, service accounts are kind of like assets. You have to track those assets just like anything else. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a heads up. I'm going to have the students ask questions, but also your last question will be, for me, was what's one thing you would tell students, as advice for when they move into their career? So you guys can be thinking on that. What questions do you guys have for the panel?
All right. As a teacher or instructor, often we used to push you to go to conferences such as a local Cactus Con or Reach DEF Con and things like that, or other ones out there. Because there's so many these days as opposed to the other days. How has that benefited you, going to your, not just from when you were a student, going into your career where you are now?
I'll get us started, but then they'll take over. It's going to sound like a broken record, but again, that's a networking opportunity. David just said he met Devin at a convention, and now they're here doing a panel together, and so there's the fruits of that in front of you. At Cactus Con, when I went, I think it was my last year of school, and so 2 years ago, there were I don't know if any of you were there, but the section where it's TLP, like amber or red, where you can't share what you learn from those conversations. Yeah. Well, anyways, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. Those are really cool talks. I think you should just go and sit there and listen for a bit. It'll also test whether you're interested in the field or not. That way you know now instead of 4 years on the line. But yeah, networking and the opportunities you have there are just great.
Snow talks.
Snow talks.
So huge networking opportunity, especially DEF CON. People from all over the world are going there, and so you can hear about what they're seeing in their industry and also just connecting with them in general. I've made a lot of great connections at DEF CON, especially. And then also some of the value you can get from the talks really will benefit your workplace. There have been a few talks where they will talk about vulnerabilities, or there was one in particular on cloud misconfigurations that no one looks at, but is there. And so if you can take that into your work, then it'll add so much value to the industry and to your company.
I was just going to add on to what Hannah said. I usually walk out of conferences with inspiration, and even if it's not a specific thing, it's a concept. And like I write it down, and then I look at my notes afterwards, and I say, how can I apply this to the work that I do? Like non-human identities, that could be a talk at a conference, and then I come back like, okay, these are an issue, and like, oh, I never really thought about this before. We should definitely take a look at this.
I'd say you can learn what topics you're interested in, what ones you're not. For a while, I was interested in radio frequency hacking until I realized it would take monumental amounts of learning to learn that, and I was not motivated enough to do that. So you'll learn what's things you like, what things you don't. Networking, of course. You learn a lot of personnel lessons too. I remember my first conference, meeting an international individual from Israel, and I approached her in the way with my group and reached out to shake my hand and introduce myself, and that threw her off guard because the U.S. way of introducing is very blunt, and other countries may call it more aggressive than not. So learning how to know your audience and have those, like what David said, hard professional skills of not going in and, hi, my name's Tyler, nice to meet you. But, hi, my name's Tyler, nice to meet you. Don't reach out for physical contact unless, you know, they seem to be okay with that. And then, so, yeah, there's so many hard professional, so many networking, and then so many topics. I really like what Hannah and I think others said as well. But every conference, I come back with more information than I can action on in the next 6 months for work. So it's talks on SCCM, talks on Intune, talks on Okta, talks on, I don't know, drawing a blank now, but it's fun.
What other questions?
I got two for you. First one, what do you think will be the next big threat or trend in cybersecurity, and how is AI impacting cybersecurity analysis and defense strategies?
So next big threat in cybersecurity, and how is AI impacting threats?
I think the next big threat has always been there. It's complacency. It's the organization. It's the risk appetite of the organization. Threats have always been in the same families for going back as far as human history is recorded. It's just it's just a new domain. I like what the military uses. They use it. That's what they call it, domains or theaters. And so the cyber is just the newest domain of what it used to be, ballistic, and then before then it was swords and metal and whatnot, and before then it was sticks and bronze and whatever. So the next big threat has always been there. Are the organizations knowing the risks involved with running their business? And if they do, are they willing to address those? As far as AI advancing, I think it lowers the barrier to entry for hackers. You can create programs and scripts, but realistically, a defense in depth approach on the organizational side should reduce the blast radius. Typically, script kiddies are not going to be able to break through a defense in depth. They might break through one layer. So I just see AI as lowering the barrier to entry.
Yeah, similar to what you said, lower barrier of entry. I would say that phishing emails are a lot more convincing, I think, with AI, because now anybody can use ChatGPT to write a pretty convincing phishing email, and that goes back to complacency. If you don't train your users and work with them to make sure that they understand how to identify a phishing email, it can be very easy to click on that, and now you've got IR to work with because somebody clicked on a phishing email. My manager likes to say that security is best when everyone is involved. And so really working with everyone in your organization to know what to identify is super important, with these phishing emails being a lot more convincing.
So follow-up question, are you, with AI, are you seeing things that's being created by AI? Are you actually seeing threats with AI?
I don't know if you can readily identify that unless there is certain emojis that I've in emails that ChatGPT may use. I do SOC for my company. Been doing that for 3 years at my company. I haven't really seen. I don't know if you can tell the difference between AI and not.
Maybe if it's got an M dash in it. All right. What other?
What is the most common coding language or kind of code that you look at?
Most common coding language or code?
I mean, for me, also SOC, I'll say mine's more so query languages. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. I think once you get to the engineering side, you'll see more scripting, and DevOps, same thing. But for me, it's just knowing your tools and knowing the languages that they operate in. Yeah.
So, you guys go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on to that. Learn the regex for your tools. Like you said, learn your tools and understand how to query the logs and what you're using.
Do you guys recommend a way to learn these query languages? Like, how would you tackle that?
I mean, again, it's going to be doing it. That's the best way, at least for me, I can learn. And then I know W3 Schools has really good introductory for everything. I mean, I used it here. And so that's a good resource even when you're I guess, working and trying to figure it out, you can use that as a tool to work through it.
On Salon's point, you can do a Azure Home Lab for KQL. I think it costs maybe like $30 a month for an E3, I think, license. Although I'm sure you can get stuff for free. Point to Joe on that. But that's how I learned KQL, was just creating my own home lab where I could sandbox everything and then just start going to town on documentation.
So Tyler, you moved from, we use Splunk at GCE to Microsoft's tools. Was there any transfer of knowledge between the two query languages?
The theory was there, the syntax was not. So it was 2 weeks of head down in documentation, OneNote. My brain actually hurt at the end of each of those days. A lot of text files to record certain clauses and phrases. I had that Splunk theory behind it, so I kind of knew what, for example, in certain EDRs, the processes are recorded in one table, and in another EDR, the processes are in another table. So, but you have to know those tables. You have to know queries. I like what Devin said about regex. Learn that. Don't be surprised if it's going to take you 2 weeks to a month to really get that down. But it's worth it. 100% worth it. Knowing your query language is so important, not just for security, but for operations and for business analytics and for HR and for finance. Because when they want to know who's used a file, or they want to know who's seen an email, or they want to know where that systems wants to know where this account's logged into, your SIM is your goal.
Nice.
Yeah, there's nothing more satisfying than being able to go back to your HR, and when they ask a question, you're like, boom, here it is, because you already know how to get that answer. I mean, it's truly a satisfying feeling.
Great. To answer your question about programming languages, I would say Python is a good place to start as a cyber student. What other questions? Mia?
So as I'm a senior, so I'm going into like interview prep and stuff. A lot of the technical stuff we learned a couple years ago, I don't really have in my brain anymore because I'm all of the other classes. So what's your best recommendation for, I guess, refreshing technical skills for preparation for a SOC interview?
I like this question. I like the business side of this stuff. What I'll start with, and I saw it on LinkedIn once, and it's very valid, and I think it goes overlooked. When you go to the job description, know every acronym and everything related to that description. That's your best place to start. And then from there, you can find, especially entry-level jobs for cyber, dumps of just questions, whether they're made up or they were used in a real interview, and then quiz yourself. So how would you do? You'll find your pain points, and then you can just focus those. And if your first interview doesn't go great, that's just more experience to do better next time.
Sorry, I have to follow up really quick. If you're like, so I got through one interview, and then the technical interview is all how to read the logs, and it's all industrial level log. Can't remember the word anymore. How do I best practice for those that I can't get access to because I'm not in an industry that allows me?
Good question. This is where I'll come back and say you're lucky to be on campus, and this campus, in my opinion, because I think all three of the guys in here can probably point you in a direction for the specific topic that you had. Maybe it was fresh in your mind then, it slipped your mind now, but I know these are all still labs, if I'm not mistaken, and so I'm sure whatever you struggled with there, you could even recreate here to a certain extent in practice. It's going to go back to that grit and that just having to do it to where, it might not be the best time, but you have to just work on those kind of gaps.
So building a home lab, definitely a big one. There's also so many learning resources out there, like Try Hack Me, Hack the Box, Pluralsight, so many resources. And not just that, but also reading some of the documentation on some of the tooling out there. Microsoft has a plethora of documentation on their platforms. And so reading through that will be helpful. And also, I actually received this advice a while back, but actually mapping out your life. go into your event viewer and see, oh, I logged in at this time. That's interesting. Oh, I accidentally entered my password wrong at this time. And just looking at the logs and quite literally mapping out your life in your own logs.
YouTube has been my friend for a long time. I learn a lot through watching videos, and I'm able to grasp it. You know, especially if I'm busy, I'm working on something, I'm cooking dinner or something like that. Instead of reading documentation, if I don't have time for that, YouTube has been really good, and there are a lot of good YouTubers out there that might show you the platform that you are looking to learn.
Nice. You got a question?
So you mentioned that you have to be careful who you're working with. Now, is that related to the fact that a large percentage of cyber incidents are insider threats or social engineering based attacks that are personal?
So the question is, yeah, I think the recommendation was be careful who you're friends with. Is that based on cybersecurity ideas like insider threats or something in that area?
Think about my answer here. I would not say most of it's related to insider threat. I heard this from my professor, George David, and his words are very true. Most people aren't malicious. There are some that are, but very few and far between. Work friends can be your friends, but make sure that they're not your only friends. At the end of the day, people will be loyal to ultimately to their paycheck and their way of life. So if your way of life and your work contradicts their way of life, they're going to pick that 90% of the time. So that's kind of where that advice was coming from.
And sometimes you just need to be able to vent about work without worrying about the repercussions of it coming back to you, you know?
Yeah, and you don't want to vent to the people at work. It sounds this. I'll say this. It might sound a tiny bit cringe, but if it's absolutely better to vent to like someone like a therapist or a mental health counselor than it is to vent to your coworkers. There is a stigma attached with mental health counselor, but it's a lot better.
We'll break that stigma now. A mental health counselor is just a coach or a teacher. Don't see them as anything negative. I've used them throughout my career. Some of the best career choices I've made is because I took it to someone to talk about. So, yeah. Go ahead, Devin.
I was just going to say that if your work friends are your only friends, I think it can hurt your career progression, because if you find another opportunity outside of your position and you're leaving your company, then you're not only losing whatever you have at work, now you're losing your entire social circle. And that's a lot harder to move away from, and that tugs at your heart, like, I can't leave where I work, even if that's a much better opportunity for you, whether that be financially or career progression in general. If your work friends are your only friends, you really become attached to that position and that career.
Did we answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay. Veronica, you had a question? Victoria.
I did have a question kind of going back to AI. You guys were talking about how it's a little bit of a threat and how it can be used maliciously. And I'm wondering, especially like in cyber and SOC, as AI becomes more automated and a tool, like are you guys seeing that actually happen? Like since it's less work for you guys or less for you guys to do, or what have you guys seen?
Yeah, I think you're definitely seeing it happen in different places in different ways. Sometimes it's just done to be done so people can see AI, and those things, don't bring real value. And then there are some places where there's thought and implementation behind it, and you're seeing it complement a role to where efficiency is going up. What I'll say to that is, I saw this on LinkedIn the other day. Someone was confident. This isn't my opinion. This is what I saw. AI will do some parts of your job much, much better than you ever can. And now it's the people who can use AI to do that part and then do the rest yourself that will leverage AI and probably they'll take your job before AI does. And so I think knowing the gaps that AI can do better and then learning how to use AI for those gaps is the right way to use AI. And that'll, okay, I'm in the class, I guess I'm gotta be careful with this, but I think even in a classroom setting when you're, with whatever you're doing, and I think professors here will agree, if you leverage it honestly and you use it like the tool that it is, I don't see them getting upset with you. I think they'll probably respect you more for it. So learning how to leverage it and the gaps that it can do things better than you is where the real value in AI is, in my opinion.
When I first started security in 2019, we had to go up process trees back in the day in our sim, and that was you'd have process ID 123 that corresponded to bad.exe, and you'd have to then go up and say we're initiating process or initiating, or sorry, in this case would be like, I'll just throw out a random column name where parent process equals ID 123, and then let's say the parent for that is 456, and then you go where, so you would build up these process trees and you'd record screenshots. But now with AI, they've got it, I don't want to use AI, it's really kind of machine learning, but with machine learning, they've built out those process trees for you graphically. So the work that I used to do back in 2019, it's gone. I save minutes per alert. But with that being said, there's a skill that I still do process trees because I don't want to lose that skill, because not every EDR is going to be configured that way. And that's your big EDRs, but if you're working for a smaller org, you're still going to want to learn that process tree. Was there a second part to that question? Or how?
I think it's like seeing it, and it sounds like you're definitely seeing that. It saves you time, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say the big thing is it doesn't completely replace like a lot of your job, and that's where the critical thinking skills come in, because you can leverage it for those gaps. But it's not going to tell you like this is how you resolve the problem. Like you have to have the understanding of this is how I get there, but AI is going to help me get there by maybe helping with some of those gaps. And also with AI, it'll enrich the data at the end of the day. There's SOARs out there that will help to automate it, but it's the analyst intuition and the analyst analyzation to, at the end of the day, say, yes, this is malicious.
What other questions?
I have a question in the realm of like social engineering and that kind of level of security, because I hear all the time that's like the biggest incorporations. So my question is, what is the best method you have discovered in informing people in your organization about social engineering security threats that make it difficult for them to understand? And follow up to that would be, what was the most difficult security concept you had to teach people or other like security?
So this has to do with employee education. What was the most difficult social engineering you've seen, or what was something that was difficult to teach employees to maybe do differently?
I think vishing is, well, I don't think, I know it's on the rise. When the help desk social engineering calls, those are brutal, and especially if your help desk is outsourced, it's even worse. So making sure, sometimes you just have to let it happen, and then that's when you swoop in and you go, hey, we might want to think about a standard operating procedure for MFA resets or password resets. So never waste an emergency is where I go with that.
I would say when it comes to working with your users, make whatever concept you're trying to teach them, make it applicable to their home life. So by doing that and making it applicable to their home life, you make it a lot more personal. You know, whatever, if it's social engineering and like phishing, like you said, teaching them that, hey, when you get a call and they're trying to urgently get you to update your bank information or whatever it is, then somebody's trying to scam you. And that makes it a lot more personal for them, and they're going to carry that into their work life because now it's a lot more personal. It's in their hearts versus just in their mind. Like, oh, these are just the cyber guys that are trying to train me on how to be more secure. If you make it personal, it really solidifies.
So I will say with user training as well, there's a lot of built out programs already out there. So you could quite literally go through a catalog of training and choose based on what you're seeing in the industry. But with that said, I feel like a lot of times it's the training where it's a lot more interactive. And so rather than just them having to watch a little video and can just play it in the background, just having it be interactive, walk them through how these attacks happen, even allowing them to slow down in their everyday life, because a lot of times these attacks happen when they're not really thinking and going too fast in their role.
One thing really quick is save all samples when you get in your SOC role. Save all samples of phishing emails and then categorize them by lures. So we have 7 different phishing examples in our library, like raw, like what's the word? Not defanged emails. And so we'll show people via screenshot of those emails, this is what they look like. And like Hannah's point about being interactive, when we show them and walk them through that email instead of just a video, it's a night and day difference. They immediately go, wow, like I didn't think this looks exactly like my vendor. It does, and this happens.
I haven't done much user training yet in my roles currently, but what I will say is conduct your own campaigns. I mean, he was saying emergencies, don't waste an emergency, but if you can, I guess, create a safe one, you can then teach that urgency without there being any risk involved.
Yeah, and with that as well, with the internal phishing campaigns, tailoring it to what you actually use internally. So sometimes we'll create templates that are based off tools we already have in place, and so it'll catch them, and we can then deploy some more training for them.
Nice. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, in the interview process, whether it was like internships or full-time positions, what were the things that made you guys stand out from the other people, whether that's like home labs, physical hands-on experience, or technical understanding or knowledge?
So I will say for me, first, soft skills. Being able to just have a conversation with who's interviewing you. Like, I know it's an interview, but at the end of the day, you are just talking with someone. And so I think going into the interview and telling yourself, like, I'm coming out of this with experience, whether it's networking or if I get the job, that's a huge skill. And then also showing your grit, showing where you work hard, showing where you go the extra mile outside of class. That will make a difference in the interview.
I started off saying communication. I'll continue with that same theme. The way you answer a question has a big impact on how they receive it and how well you display your knowledge. I forget what they stand for, but there's STAR, S-T-A-R, and is it ACT? Or there's STAR, and there's another method that you'll see if you just Google STAR. It's a structure for how to answer questions. That's huge in communicating your knowledge. The other thing I'll say is I've conducted interviews, and even if I'm in a Kudelski polo, I think you should outdress me, in my opinion. That's maybe not just my opinion, but again, it's an easy one to hit on. Dress like you want the job. And then the last thing I'll hit is when they ask if you have any questions at the end, first off, you definitely should. One that I love to use, and I'll give you all for free, is as we reach the conclusion of our interview, are there any questions you'd like me to further answer or any doubts I can address now before, we leave this room? That way, maybe I messed up on a question early on. They'll bring it up to me. I know I would if you ask me. And then you have a chance to, either one, you get to learn what to learn for next time, or two, you get to go back to the drawing board, re-answer that question, and then reaffirm those doubts.
For me, it was 2 parts. And in both my help desk and security interviews, it was the amount of friends that I had that went to bat for me. The help desk manager at the time, when I sat down to interview, she told me, "You have 7 people that came to my office before this and told me you should be hired. So you need to tell me what's up." The second part of that was, and the same thing for security, that I think there was 4 or 5. And again, all people that I met in my class, all people that I had met in conferences, and there was this open source hacking one that I went to as well. The second is know your stuff. I studied for the Security Plus like it was my life. It cost me $200 at the time. I think I was broke at the time that I paid for it, or I was broke right after. And so study like your food depended on it, and then practice your stuff with. When I can't even talk. Sorry. When I interviewed for the help desk, I knew command prompt pretty well. And so one of the questions the help desk manager asked is, how would you test these things with command prompt? And I was able to tell her verbally, straight to her face, this is how you do it, without needing computer, without nothing. So know your stuff and have some friends that can back you up.
And I would just add, this might be general common knowledge anyway when it comes to interviewing, but don't be afraid to say, I don't know. I haven't come across that before. I haven't used this tool before, but here's how I would handle the problem. And here's my critical thinking, my problem solving steps using the STAR method, like Sean mentioned. Being able to show an employer, because they're not looking for you to know everything right off the bat. They know that they're making an investment in you as an employee, and they're okay with you learning a little bit when you get into the role. You're not going to know everything about the tools that they use. So being able to show that you can learn what they're using, you can apply your problem-solving skills to what their problems are, that's how you prove yourself to be a valuable employee.
I need a 100% emoji there. That was good.
One more thing I'll hit on, kind of working off what Tyler just said. So I work at Kudelski Security now. You graduated a year, 2 years ago?
It was last year.
Okay, last year. Sorry. Prior to graduation, that final year, we had a career fair, and in that career fair, I don't know if, show of hands, who's cyber? Is there, everyone's here to cyber? Okay, majority. I don't know how they are now, but back, I guess 2 years ago, there was a lot of engineering and not much cyber. And so the one table I saw there was Kudelski Security, and it was one of our recruiters and someone from HR, and they could both see my resume and speak to the things that I had on there, and so that impressed me, and so they caught my attention. 2 months later, or a month later, there was a panel right here for Kudelski employees, and they came and they spoke, and then I heard more things that I liked. And so at that point, I knew nobody in the company, but I met the recruiter in HR, and then I came and I spoke to the people who were up here. Going to what Tyler said, when I went to that interview, I knew my direct manager, I knew his manager, I knew an analyst, I knew HR, and I knew a recruiter. I can guarantee you with a full certainty that that is probably the reason I got the interview, and then I did the rest to get the job. And so I gave you kind of the start, what I think you should have in an interview, but I think that is what you need to do now before you even go to that interview.
And what was the number one thing you liked about Kudelski Security?
So the thing that caught my attention was our cafe is run by a Michelin chef. And so I've had duck bone marrow for like $15.50 with like a 4-course meal. I love food. I'm not going to shy away from that. And so that's what I honestly heard. And I'm like, I went home that day and I'm like, I'm going to work there to my parents. Just like obviously acknowledged it for the statement that it was. And then I networked and I interviewed and now I work there. Now I eat there. So I actually missed lunch for this, but it's okay.
Okay, so the last question to you guys, what's one piece of advice you would give a college student as they round out their, or in their college career, or rounding out as they go into a career?
I would say that if I could go back in time 6 years to when I graduated, I wish I wouldn't have been as scared to look into cyber, because I took it as I'm not smart like these guys and I can't use these tools like these guys. So I'm going to take business information systems because I don't have to take a fancy math class. And so looking back, I wish that I would have specialized a little bit more and used my resources here at the college to get a broader understanding this is what's out there and really specialize in what I was really interested in. I don't regret, thankfully, the path that I went on ended up working out, but I think I used a lot of years just going through the support and sysadmin when, at the end of the day, this is the kind of stuff that really gets me interested in. And now I love it. But if I could go back, that's my advice to you, is really try to find what you're really interested in and then specialize in it if that's what you're really certain on, and use the resources here to find what that is.
My thing would be willing to accept change. That is the only constant. And the more you can accept change and the quicker you can, there's this thing called the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. And the faster that you can go through that loop, the better off you will be.
I guess I'll reiterate this and I'll support what they said earlier. Use your resources while you're here, even if that's just 6 more months when you graduate. Use those resources. They'll set you up for either a smoother transition to the workforce, or not using them will make it harder. I know people who are still looking for jobs in cyber that graduate with Hannah and I. And so there is that real need for it. There's also that they don't need you that bad if you're not the right candidate. So use your resources here to be that right candidate. And then I'm going to echo on it again. Network. Your circle will matter, whether it's in 6 months or in 10 years when you want to pivot to a different company.
Yeah, and I basically have the same thing. Don't be afraid to go the extra mile. Don't be afraid to go to conferences. Don't be afraid to talk to people in your classes and make friends. It all will matter, especially after you graduate.
Great. Thank you guys for being here. Can you guys give them a round of applause? And I'll just say again, thank you for giving back to the GCU community. Appreciate every one of you being here. So they'll be around for a few minutes. If you guys have further questions, you can come talk to them. But thank you, students, for being here as well. All right, we'll see you.